Hello and how's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest Bethesda news, only there isn't any Bethesda news lately, or at least in the last few days to really report on, but don't worry, I still have some content that I lined up that I did want to talk about when there wasn't really any pending or trending news going down in Bethesda town, and I do want to talk about 5 important things that I think Starfield would have to have or do in order to be mostly successful, and these are 5 important things, but bear in mind they are my opinion still. This is kind of like a different variation of that Starfield wishlist video. Instead of a wishlist, I'm basically going to say 5 things I feel like Bethesda would have to do with this game in order for it to be massively successful. It could still be successful without these things. These are just my opinion, but before I get too much into today's video, you might hear a bunch of random sentient AI lawnmowers outside, because anytime I start to record my audio, these things just start up and run for hours every day somehow. I don't understand how quickly their lawns are growing for this to be happening, but it happens almost every time I record my videos. And yes, I changed my shirt finally, and I know you guys like to talk about how I like to wear the same shirt for a few days in a row for some reason, and that shirt had a hole in it because it's like 10 years old, and I was one of those Scarface kids in high school. So but let's not waste any more time and get to today's content. Like I said, I'm going to be listing 5 things that I feel Bethesda would have to do with Starfield in order for it to be successful. And I'll go ahead and get the most obvious thing out of the way. They have to release the game soon, if not this year. They freaking talked about the game or announced the game back at E3 2018, and yes, they did say we have to be patient with this game, and yes, it was confirmed they did have to basically build a massive upgrade from the old creation engine for this game and beyond, meaning also for the Elder Scrolls 6, so they had a lot of work to do for this game, and according to some, I guess, anonymous Bethesda developers, Starfield is going to be like one of the most ambitious games of all time, and my foot itches as I say that. Maybe a gypsy's trying to tell me something about my statement there. And with all that in mind, that kind of gets people really excited about the game, but at the same time, Bethesda generally doesn't talk about a game that early before they actually release it. Usually Bethesda will talk about a game within the 2 years before the game comes out. Rarely has that pattern been broken, but it has been broken in the past. But now we have all this time between when Starfield was announced, and it's 2021 now, dude. That's 3 years since the announcement. And if Starfield comes out in 2022, that would be 4 years after the announcement, because that's how math works. Why am I saying all this? But my point is that even though Bethesda hasn't said much about the game, it's obvious there is a ton of hype for it, as people are always trying to compare any Bethesda statement about anything to be relevant to Starfield somehow, so people are really curious what this game is, and I think that's one of the biggest things about it, is the mystery. No one knows to expect from the first new Bethesda Game Studios IP in over 25 years, but as someone who is highly ingrained into the Starfield community and the Bethesda community, someone who pays attention to a lot of news and actually goes to a lot of places, a lot of Bethesda communities, and kind of tries to read how people feel about things and see if I can discover anything new going on or any leaks and stuff, I at the same time can read a lot of community statements and just get a pretty good hype feel for the game. And I gotta be honest, if the game doesn't come out this year, I think people are gonna kind of not be as hyped for it and probably not pay as much attention to it, which maybe is what Bethesda wants, because like they said, they want you to be patient, and if the game doesn't come out this year, then wow, who knows when the game's gonna come out. At this point, it's just gonna be one of those, is it gonna come out this year? Is it gonna come out this year? But bear in mind, COVID is the variable here. COVID is the anomaly that has affected a lot of industries, especially the gaming industries, and a lot of developers said any game that was targeted for a 2020 or 2021 release date likely had some sort of internal delay, just due to all the complications from quarantines and stuff like that. But bear in mind, I still stand firm by saying that in order for Starfield to be successful, it has to be released in 2021 or at the latest 2022, because beyond that, unless the game is massively amazing, it's just gonna be a bad move to wait so long. And part of my evidence against why I think it's not gonna be 2023 and beyond is because even though Bethesda generally doesn't show a game as early as they did with Starfield before release, they still try to talk about a game as close as release to possible, and it just would be crazy to think that maybe it would take them 5 years after announcement to get a game out there, but who knows? This part's speculation, but my point is, the game needs to come out soon, no later than 2022. I've been team 2021 for a while, but COVID is a definite anomaly and a hard one to predict how hard it affected a company that doesn't talk about anything anyway. So we don't know how much Bethesda was affected by this. Some insiders claim Bethesda hasn't been as affected by COVID as others, but who knows? I still think the game has to come out by no later than 2022. Otherwise, I'm pretty confident confident the hype and the attention and just the overall, I guess, enthusiasm for Starfield will diminish substantially. I'll still be hyped and I'll still cover it, obviously, but the majority of the community will be in Sucktown, and even though that sounds like a cool place, it's not! The second thing that I think Starfield needs to have, or in this case not have, in order to be massively successful, is it shouldn't be No Man's Sky, and by that I mean the majority of the game's content, planets, and everything should not be procedurally generated. I say this not because it's a bad thing. No Man's Sky is a great game now, but the truth of the matter is Bethesda Game Studios has the community and the love they have because of the fact that their game worlds and almost all their content are beautifully handcrafted. They have some of the most beautiful game worlds and environments out there, and a lot of that is because they handcraft all of it. Yes, Bethesda Game Studios does use procedural generation in terms of quests, and even like gameplay design and environment design. They use procedural generation to take assets that they did create by hand and place them strategically using an algorithm into the world. That makes sense because that just saves time anyway, right? And an algorithm really could do a good job at putting a plant where it should go just as much as a developer could, and I'd rather have the developers making handmade, handcrafted content and having an AI, a procedural generation system, kind of help place those things or do little stuff like that. But my point is, I still want the majority of Ooh, Speed Racer! I need to go on the live stream to see Speed Racer winning. But my point is that I want at least the majority of the content in Starfield to feel handcrafted and not just be like this procedural generation, just cauldron of just randomness. Well, I feel like I made my point pretty clear here and I don't need to like elaborate more. Bethesda does great with handcrafted things, and if they can kind of have a good blend of and if they could kind of have a good blend of handcrafted stuff and use the AI, the procedural generation, to fill that handcrafted stuff into a believable space, into a believable universe, that would be hype. And this kind of goes into the third thing I want to say. With space games, you kind of run the problem of what I call the Mass Effect 1 problem in terms of trying to make the realism of space have, like, emptiness, because space is a lot of emptiness and a lot of planets are definitely barren and don't have anything of use on them at all. In Mass Effect 1, on a lot of the planets you can land on, you spent most of the time just driving up and down and uncovering the grid to find like 4 things you can salvage, and well, it felt like you were actually exploring these big barren planets that kind of got boring after a bit. And Todd Howard did say he does plan to gamify a lot of Starfield's aspects and just mechanics, meaning probably how gravity works and fuel and spaceflight, if spaceflight isn't a game and stuff. But the point is that I want there to be a good blend between the realism of the game, the emptiness of space, and actually have a world full of content. Because you're not going to have fun in a world where the majority of it's empty. Even if it's realistic and space is truly that way, that's not what we're used to from a Bethesda Game Studios game. We're used to just finding something interesting all the time, and even if we're not finding interesting points of interest, we're looking at the environment, we're looking at the landscape, the beautiful crafted plants, the interesting creatures, all that kind of stuff. And if it's an empty space where you go on a planet and it's like beautiful to look at, but man, there's nothing there, people are gonna tune out of the game unless they're die-hard space fans who like to play games like Kerbal Space Program or something. And the majority of the gaming community is not that, so Bethesda will have to find a very good balance between the realism of space, the emptiness of space, and actually having a game full of content. And then the fourth thing is probably one of the most common things you would see on this list. I want Starfield to have very deep lore and an interesting setting, just like the Elder Scrolls, and also Fallout. Even though Bethesda didn't create the Fallout universe, they expanded it in an interesting way, and they did create the Elder Scrolls universe and kept expanding it in very interesting ways, so I hope Starfield is the same. I don't want Starfield to feel like there's not much going on behind the scenes. I want there to be history of how Starfield's universe came to be as time passed into the future. I want there to be explanation for the technologies. All this is very similar to how Mass Effect did it, and I hope that Starfield can maybe even have an encyclopedia, an in-game encyclopedia thing for the first time in a Bethesda game, because that would make sense for the setting. If it's a futuristic game, I mean, we kind of have encyclopedia stuff now. I can bring up my phone and look up anything that I'm experiencing in my life and basically read about it at any point in time. And I hope that there can be a codex or an encyclopedia thing in Starfield, also for the reason of helping people be introduced to this deep lore and stuff, and to go into a little bit more explanation about how all this works in the game. I hope that Earth has major cities that are huge and full of life, and maybe I can understand if we don't get to go to those cities just in terms of game development, like reasons and limitations, but I hope that they exist and maybe we get to see footage of it. And I just hope the game has very deep lore. Stuff is actually explained and not just like thrown up into space magic or future technology magic, and I hope that there's a lot of intrigue in the game's lore as well. Just like there's as many mysteries in the Elder Scrolls lore, I hope there's a bunch of mysteries and stuff in Starfield. Basically, I want Starfield to be like Elder Scrolls, but in space, kind of, if that makes sense. And let's move on to the fifth thing, and the last thing I want to talk about in today's video, which kind of goes along with what I just said, and I made a little bit of a list here so I can keep track of my 5 things, because my memory sucks, and the 5th thing is aliens. I even drew an alien there for you, or for me, I guess, so I can remember. I wasn't planning on showing that alien, but now, there you go. Now you see how dumb my notes can be. I'm still a child, apparently, but I want there to be aliens in the game. I want the aliens to be as interesting as the races in the Elder Scrolls games, and I want the aliens to have deep lore, setting explanations, and everything for their culture, kind of like how Mass Effect did as well. And this also goes toe-in-toe with why I want there to be an in-game codex or an encyclopedia. Apparently, I need to make a whole video on that topic alone, because all this kind of fits into that. It would be just a great way to kind of let the player read about this new universe that they're experiencing for the first time, and if it's going to be a very great space epic, like Bethesda explains it themselves to be, there's going to have to be a lot going on in the game, meaning a lot of different factions, and aliens with their own stuff, and I just can't wait for Starfield if all 5 of these things are actually in the game. The first thing's kind of like a whatever, because I get it. If the game can't come out by this year or next year because of COVID, I understand, but that would just suck. But basically, before I ramble on for too long about how hyped I am for this game and what I'd like to see in it, I'm going to end today's video. If you enjoy seeing content like this that's not like as news related, be sure to share the video and like it, because to be honest, I don't do videos like this because my news videos usually get more views, so I kind of gotta at the same time do what the algorithm wants, and the community lets me know what they want by actually watching my videos. So if you want stuff like this video needs to get a lot of views, and it needs to do as good as my news content. Otherwise, I have to focus on that. But that's going to finish up today's video. As always, if you enjoyed the content, be sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn notifications on. And if you want to help grow the channel and the community, be sure to share the video, share the content. It is highly appreciated. And speaking of appreciation, huge shout out to these amazing people for going above and beyond to support the channel and bring you content like this. I am updating this list today. So if you supported the channel in the last few weeks, you will see your name get added to this list. If you want your name to get added to this list today, you can support the channel now, because I won't be updating this list for another couple of weeks. If you want a permanent feature video shout out, you can support the channel on Ko-fi, Patreon, or here on YouTube as an exclusive channel member. Links for all this and more are down in the description below, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when the hype for Starfield is assuming... I'm not even going to say that phrase anymore. I feel like it's overdone.
It just worked.